Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Marcus. I'm a professional miniature painter since 2013, and my mission is very simple: making miniature painting accessible for everybody. And today we are breaking down the 7 essential painting techniques that every painter should know. This video is a complete beginner roadmap. It is fast, practical, and easy to understand. And here is a quick overview on the techniques we are covering today. We will cover layering, stippling, feathering, dry brushing, glazing, washing, and last but not least, the edge highlighting. By the end of this video, you will understand them all. And in my upcoming videos, I will dive deeper and deeper in those very essential techniques. Let's start with layering, the foundation of clean and smooth transitions. Layering works by applying multiple thin coats. Each one is covering a slightly smaller area than the last layer. This creates a very controlled transition from your shadows to the midtones up to your highlights.
As you can see, I really like to prepare my tones for the layering before I start. And I start with a dark green foundation and go over it with a very thin mid-tone of a nice and bright green. And from this tone I go lighter and lighter. As you can see here, keep your color consistency, your paint consistency very thin so you don't have any irritations on your layering. Keep in mind, all of those layers have to be 100% dry before you go over it with your next layer. And in addition to that, they should also be opaque. So if one layer is not 100% opaque, you can also go over that, completely covering with another layer of the same brightness.
Layering takes time. This is a very fundamental technique, but it's absolutely worth it. And you will need it at every miniature. Let's go to technique number 2, stippling. I really like the technique. Stippling creates a nice texture or a gritty realism. Instead of brushing motions, like in layering, you try to gently tip the top of your brush on the surface of the miniature. With that stippling technique, you can create several kind of looks. You can use it for leather, so it looks a little bit worn out. You can use it for textiles, so it looks a little bit like linen. But you can also, for example, use it for a beard, so it looks a little bit more rugged. For this technique, I personally like to use a little bit older brushes, so don't damage my very precise and very nice brushes. So don't throw away your old brushes. They can be very useful. But why do I need texture? Why do I need stippling? I can just layer everything. In my opinion, as a miniature painter, my job is it to make a miniature look interesting. And in that case, I really like this technique and we are going into it. You will really like it.
And here you can see my brushes that I like to use. They're very old, but they're working. Once you go to more precise areas, I still prefer to have a very sharp brush. As you can see here, I work my little dots on the brightest highlight areas of that leather part, and I will keep going as long as I think the highlights are not done. It is very important to not go too fast to the next brightness level. So focus on a lot of little dots and not be too rough with them, because otherwise they can also build up a little bit of a texture. We don't want like a physical texture. We want to have like a artsy texture. So keep your paint thin and focus on many little dots instead of some rough dots. As you can see, you can go brighter and brighter as much as you like, as much as you prefer. Keep in mind, the rougher the dots, the rougher the texture will look. The finer the dots, the finer the texture will look. So if you want to have like a fine silk linen, you will go with a lot of dots. As you can see here on this work in progress dwarfs, I made a pretty rough texture.
So this was stippling. I really like to see it as kind of like a micro spray I apply on my miniature. So I try to keep the dots as small as possible to create the best possible look. Let's go into technique number 3, The feathering. Feathering is how I create very soft transitions on bigger surfaces. For me, that is a very, very gentle technique. So I like to use my brush as precise and as light as possible. Don't overdo it with the pressure on the model. You really like the tip to just hit the miniature, to really apply as little paint as possible, to keep it very, very thin, precise, and still smooth and kind of like wavy. What you really want to try is to touch the model, make a feathering stroke, and let the pigments flow in one direction.
So I keep my consistency of the feathering paint a little bit thinner than the layering paint, and kind of similar to the stippling paint that I have. So don't overdo it with the paint on the brush as well. As you can see here, the much feathering strokes you do, the finer and the better the result will be. Where I really like to use the technique is on every kind of like metal surface. As you can see here, the first layer can be a little bit more rough than the last layers. You basically have to build up a fundament for the rest of your paint layers, and I like to have it as opaque as possible. As you can see here, also the paint is almost like in a layer consistency, so not too thin. And the next coats, like this one and the first highlights and all the other highlights, are a little bit more on the moist side. And as you can see here, I try to have as little paint on the brush as even possible. You can see you can still paint a lot with that. You don't have to overload your brush. And the closer you come to your final highlight, the smaller you have to go. And I really love that result on metal.
The key point of this technique is obviously the brush control. The better you are with your brush, the better the result of the feathering will be. I also like to think about feathering more of a mechanism. So keep in mind, when I'm talking about feathering in other techniques, that means more like the brush stroke and like the mechanic and the movement, the motion. This is what I mean with feathering. To apply the paint in a certain motion and in a certain feathering technique. And now we come to my least favorite technique, but I kind of need to cover this. Obviously, dry brushing is very important for a lot of people, and I also do it. But as a guy who likes clean miniatures, or better say, very much controlled painted miniatures, they can be also artsy, they can be rough. But dry brushing sometimes seems to be a little bit uncontrolled. But I will show you how I do it, and I think this will pretty much help you too. And to not waste too much time on dry brushing, because I know there are way better dry brushing tutorials than what I want to do, here is the basic idea behind dry brushing. You try to have as little paint possible on your brush. And by simply stroke the brush over detailed areas, like a fur or maybe like a chainmail, you apply just the highlight on the very top surface. Which means you instantly have the shadows and the highlight, which is pretty nice. It gives you texture, it gives you kind of like a character, but on the downside, it will always look a little bit like it is dry brushed. Why is that a thing that I don't like? As a miniature painter, or let's say as a miniature artist, however you want it, I like my miniatures to not show the technique I used, which is not always possible, obviously, but I try as good as possible to make my model stand for itself and not the technique on the model. It is the same like when you look at a nice painting. You don't want to think about, oh, this is how he did it, or this brush he used, or this paint he used. No, you just want to look at the picture and say, oh, that's a nice picture. So what are the key usage for that? We use it for speed painted armies, we use it for terrain, we use it for every kind of like basing. So there are several options where you can really, really use it. And I'm very sure also those slap chop techniques are working fine for a lot of people, and I'm very happy as long as people start paint their models.
So here you see it's very simple. We put a little bit of paint on our dry brush. You see, don't overload it. Then we get rid of the majority of that paint again. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it should be at least a little bit dry. And then as you can see, I gently touch gently brush over the model. Don't go into that residues, don't go into deep in the model. You want to have it on the outside of your model. So by building up those layers of dry paint, you can really see the highlights, the shadows, everything is like really easy. And the same with layering, feathering. You are putting one layer after another, and after like the second or third layer, you have already a nice transition on the model, as you can see here.
Technique number 5, glazing. This is pretty much the opposite of dry brushing. You want to apply thin, very low pigmented paint, very controlled over a certain area of your miniature. By applying multiple transparent layers to your surface of the model, gives you such a smooth and elegant look to every miniature you will paint. Why do I like glazing so much? Glazing is always a technique that can help you. It is perfect to shade something down. It is very nice to give something just another color, which is like a tinting. It is also nice if you have a little bit of trouble with like your surface of your model because maybe your paint is a little bit too thick. Then with glazing, you cannot repair it 100%, but sometimes you can fix it a little bit and the smoothness of the glaze will help you with repairing some parts of your model. And sometimes I even like to glaze the highlight. For example, with white armor, I really like to apply a glaze of white in the very upper areas because sometimes it's very hard to paint a nice white, keep the contrast, and that's why I also like to use glazing for highlights, and that's pretty interesting too. My main usage for glazing is fixing transitions. I had a lot of people coming to me as like, how do you do the blending? This blending looks amazing. Sometimes they also say the blending looks shit, but not talk about that. Let's stay positive. Some blendings are very nice, and normally the responsibility for the blending is not airbrush, is not dry brush, is not layering, it is glazing. And with glazing, I can do very nice transitions on all of my models.
Let's start with the paint consistency. You can see here glaze medium, and I will mix it up with the glaze color I want. In that case, it is almost like the mid-tone of my green that I started earlier. As you can see here, it is very watery and you can see it on my hand. It is completely transparent, and that is the key consistency. In that case, I had a very, very rough layering. So I go over the whole area with like very precise and very gentle strokes. So I try to blend it together over several steps. And here you can see this is my glaze consistency when I want to work on the saturation of faces. I really like to do that with a deep red to have in the shadows of especially like warrior models like Space Marines, or basically every of my showcase models. As you can also see here, I use those glazes on every shadow, on the nose, on the lips, on the eyes. So that should pop out for me because I think that makes the miniature look very interesting. And I brought some examples because I think glazing is one of the most specific and also the most important techniques. And as you can see here, you can basically glaze all the surfaces with a paint that you really like. I really like those vibrant red tones. And especially for that project, I really glazed pretty much all the surfaces with the same glaze tone because I want everything to look super vibrant. As you can see, the color combination is very special and very striking, and so I think the red tone works very well. But also on a very cold painted model like this, some striking red tones on the knuckles, so the fists, also in the face, on the lips. That looks very, very much like he's under pressure in a fight. But also, as you can see here, this is already a very reddish model, but I really like that tone. So I brought that as an example as well. On the nose, on the hands, everywhere where the blood is streaming a little bit stronger.
Technique number 6. Let's get wild. Washing. But isn't washing the same like glazing? Not really. But let's get into it. Washing is also with transparent paint. So this is a similarity with glazing. Washing is also applying on surfaces after they are basically painted. So that's also the same. But what is the big difference between glazing and washing? In my opinion, the biggest difference is, first of all, the pigmentation. In my opinion, glazing has a less pigmentation than washing. So for washing, I really want to have like a strong wash, a strong transparent paint that makes a big difference on my surface, on the model. So I have one wash over it and it looks amazing. And another big difference is, as I maybe intended with my hands, washing is way more wild. I want to apply it full stream ahead on my model. I have a fur, I wash over it, everything is covered with it. It is not very controlled, which is fine because it's fast, it's efficient, it can look amazing, but it is not as elegant as glazing. I think every army painter can agree that washes are magical. We need it, we use it, I use it for everything. I use it for metals, I use it for basically every miniature. Washes can be alcohol based, it can be acrylic washes, it can be whatever mixture you want. Washes should just make your life easier and we love it.
So first of all, sorry for the bad quality, but sometimes, as you can see here, you can really lightly wash something. So it's like a fine film on all of the surfaces. But also what I like, to pull up that wash in some places. So you have really a strong result. And I really love that.
And now we are coming to the absolutely queen of techniques, edge highlights. Edge highlights and the little brother, dark lining, are going hand in hand. I will put edge highlighting and dark lining in the same category, and this for me is technique number 7. But why do I need edge highlights? Everybody's talking about it. It is really hard, to be honest. It's not like an easy technique. Sometimes it can be easier with mechanical parts, but with organic parts it's super hard. And the same with dark lining. Why should I have all the residues and all the lines in a dark tone? I can tell you this is what separates the good miniatures from the great miniatures. So it's not just for creating more highlights and, oh, I can do the best edge highlight, oh, it's so nice. No, basically what I think is the most important part is to make it better readable, especially with miniature painting. The miniatures sometimes are very small, and not everybody is wearing goggles when they casually look at your Space Marine army. No, that's not the case. So why do I do it? I do it so the miniature is better readable in every kind of situation. So not only if you have goggles or the perfect lighting, no. So when I look at models and they have nice edge highlights, they have nice dark lining around all the little details of the model. For my eyes, it's better readable. I can look at it. I absolutely identify every little part, every detail. And it also tells me that you really put an effort in it. And I can tell you, putting effort in edge highlights and dark lining really makes the difference to all of your models.
So let's get into it. Here is my referee from Blood Bowl, and he needs some touch-ups, so I thought I'd give him some edge highlights. And there are basically two ways of doing edge highlights. On a very edge like this, like the book, it is very easy. I take the side of my brush and I'm just basically rubbing it all across that edge. But this is not always possible. Because as you can see here, I cannot find the edge. So what I do is I have to draw that line by myself, which is really not that easy. So try to keep as little paint on your brush as possible to make really, really fine lines. This is also the same consistency I use for battle damage, for little scratches, and yeah, I think that's really the key to a nice readable model. As you can see here, obviously you can also then go over that with another highlight. It really depends on how good and how precise you are with your brush. And as you can see here, sometimes you just have to give your best, you have to try your best to find that perfect edges, even when it seems like you already have it. I like to do that sometimes multiple times, so I hit it
So
perfectly.
those are the 7 core techniques. Master these and you can paint whatever model you want. If you want deeper tutorials, full project, or personal guidance, my detailed lessons launching in December on Patreon. Thank you for watching, stay creative and keep painting.